So to start off with, I'm just going to cover some of the basics, such as the structure of the team in Highlander and some terminology I'm going to be using in the upcoming reviews. So the team in Highlander is divided into two groups, and that is the combo and the flank. The combo is usually the medic, demo, pyro, and heavy, while the flank is usually the soldier and the scout. The classes that I did not list kind of move between the two as needed. And then also on some Koth maps, like Product, for instance, the Scout is combo while Heavy is flank, usually. It doesn't have to be, but usually that's the way it's done. And that's just because on Koth maps that are really open, like Product, the Scout gets a lot of usage out of having the beam on them and having that buff. So some terminology. One of the big ones that I'm going to be talking about is Uber Ad and Uber Disad. That is short for Uber Advantage and Uber Disadvantage. What that means is if you have Uber Advantage, you have a higher percentage of Uber than the other team does. So, for instance, you have Uber and they do not. This is a big advantage in Highlander because you can be invulnerable and they can't. Conversely, being on Disad or Uber Disadvantage means the other team has a higher percentage of Uber. They're closer to getting Uber than you are. On the note of Ubers, there is one more term related to Ubers, and that is post-Uber. It is the time after which one or both teams have used Uber, and those Ubers have ended. And that leads us into our next bit of terminology, sacks or sackways. What that means is a number of your classes, the more the better usually, are going to die for some other kind of pick on the other team, usually the medic. So what that would look like is ideally everybody except your medic and one player would go in and die for the other team's medic, and then your medic in that one class would leave to your spawn so that they live and don't die. You would do this when the other team has Uber or is closer to Uber than you, and the idea of doing this would be to kill the other team's med or make them use Uber so that they no longer have more Uber or have Uber when you do not. Another bit of terminology that I would like to cover is the term feeding. What feeding means literally is that you're feeding the other team kills, but what it looks like from a gameplay perspective is you're dying unnecessarily. So that would mean walking in alone or overextending, stuff like that. So in Highlander, the successful Highlander teams are generally very coordinated, and they will fight at the same time, they will leave at the same time, and they will try to die at the same time, so they spawn together. So what that has to do with feeding is if you walk in by yourself, if you take fights by yourself when your team is trying to group up or when your team is dead, you will be offset from your team in terms of spawn waves, in terms of when you're alive, and that prevents your team from fighting together. So feeding is generally something you want to avoid. You want to make sure you're living until your team is ready to push, and then push in with your team. A concept that becomes important in Highlander and competitive in general is rollouts. What what a rollout is you getting to mid, as on the case of Koth, just the point, as fast as possible. The reason this is important is if the other team is able to get to the point before you, they can get really forward, lock up the chokes, and just stop you from getting in at all, and just win by default. So it is important that you learn how to properly get to mid and get set up on mid. What that looks like depends on what class you are. For the classes that can explosive jump, so soldier and demo, you can't move before the game starts. You know that little period of warm up where you're stuck standing still. You can't move, but you can still explosive jump. So before the round, you'll be able to jump, and then depending on the map, there will be a certain rollout path you want to know so that you can get to mid as fast as possible. That one there is one of the rollouts you can do for Demoman on product. For other classes, such as Heavy or Scout, etc., what your rollout is going to look like is you're going to be walking. But the path that you take is important. So in general, you're going to be walking along the shortest path, but you also want to be walking close to your medic for as long as possible. For a class like Heavy, that's important because you need a buff before the mid-fight. For a class like Scout, it's important so that your med can beam you and be faster to the mid-fight themselves. The reason that these buffs on rollout are so important is something called crit heals. If you haven't taken damage in the last 15 seconds, you will be healed 3 times as fast. So buffing players when they have these crit heals is an easy way to get lots of health out onto your team. And players who have just spawned also have crit heals. On Koth maps, soldiers should whip the heavy to mid, while on payload during setup, soldiers should whip the engineer. One final note, remember that rollouts are map specific, so I will cover specific rollouts once I cover individual maps. The last thing I wanted to go over was just to very briefly go into each class's specific role. So for Scout, you are kind of a cleanup class. You chase down damage that your demo may call. You punish people who are overextending or getting too forward into your team. You can watch the flank for anybody trying to sneak through on the flank, and you can hunt behind for things like spies or soldiers who have jumped behind. That's not to say that you're not a powerful class in your own right. On maps like Koth that are very open, it is very easy for you to start getting forward and doing lots of damage to the other team. But be careful of getting too forward and running straight into the other team alone. And then, of course, Scout's most fun job, on payload you push the cart. Soldier, similar to Scout, you're going to be watching the flank. What that often looks like for Soldier is you're going to be locking up chokes on the flank with explosive spam. You can also be going for bombs onto the other team, or bombing behind the other team in order to split the other team's attention and force them to look both forward and backwards. As Pyro, your job is to kind of be a bodyguard for your medic and to a lesser extent the rest of your combo. So what that means is you'll be following your medic around, you'll be spy checking for your medic, you'll be trying to predict when the spy will be crossing the point, when the spy will be behind you, and trying to catch out that spy. You're looking to reflect spam, you're looking to push back Ubers, and you're looking to deny anyone who is trying to bomb your medic. That's not to say that you can't go on the offensive as Pyro. If you get good damage calls from your demo, you can just walk forward into the other team. Just be careful of dying and then leaving your medic alone. As a demo, your 2 primary jobs are dealing damage and denying space to the enemy. So what that looks like oftentimes is if the enemy is getting forward, you're trying to sticky them off, hit them with stickies, deal damage to them, and even before they walk in, you're preemptively locking off chokes to prevent them from getting in. Demos are also typically main calling for the team. What that means is you're coordinating your team and trying to get them to work together and push in at the same time. I'll cover more of what you'll be main calling in individual map reviews. As Heavy, you are a very big area denial class. If the other team is overextending into you, you are great at punishing that. You're also fairly good at denying bombers and catching out spies. However, where Heavy really shines is in post-Ubers. In post-Ubers, if you are alive and you manage to keep a buff throughout the Uber, coming in once both Ubers fades is a very powerful place for Heavy to be. However, you typically want to avoid being in the Uber itself. Engineer's role depends on the format. So on payload, you are, of course, on defense, building your level 3, protecting your level 3, maintaining your nest. On offense, you're pushing the cart. Very fun, I know. On Koth, Engineer is more so focused on defending his sniper and stopping people from getting through the flank. As Medic, you of course have the obvious roles of healing your teammates. However, you also have the less obvious job of keeping track of Ubers. So what that means is not only keeping track of your own Uber, calling out when you have, when you don't have, but also trying to keep track of the other team's Uber. And the easiest way to do that is just the enemy is going to get Uber at about the same rate as you. So if you die with 50%, the other team likely had 50% as well if you spawned at the same time, and then you just add 20% to account for your respawn time, so that you would know if you die with 50%, the other team has 70%. Sniper is one of the most powerful classes in Highlander, and can be very oppressive if they aren't countered. As Sniper, it is your job to punish people who disrespect you and play in the open. So on defense, you're looking to just control a sightline. So you don't even need to kill people to be effective, you're just living. and holding a sightline, stopping people from walking into it, and if they do disrespect you and walk into it, then you kill them. On offense, you're more so looking to counter the other team's sniper. You're looking to force that sniper to take a sniper for sniper duel with you and hoping that the defensive sniper loses. And you can influence that by calling for buffs beforehand or walking in with your team. As spy, as spy, your job is to go for picks, but also to feed information to your team. So you can call things like where the other team is, what the other team's Ubers are, whether they're low, their health, stuff like that. And then also to coordinate your picks with players like your soldier. You should always avoid going for picks alone if you have any other option. That covers the basics of Highlander. I hope that it helps, and I wish you luck in your future games.